The lighthouse at Cape Sorrow has stood for 147 years, perched on a finger of black granite that juts into the North Atlantic like an accusation. The keeper's log, a leather-bound volume maintained by every lighthouse operator since 1876, contains entries that span generations, documenting weather patterns, ship sightings, and maintenance schedules with the mechanical precision expected of men whose job is to warn others away from danger. But starting in August of 1923, the entries begin to change. The handwriting becomes erratic, sentences trail off mid-thought, and buried among the routine observations about fog density and lamp oil levels, there appear references to something else, to a ship that should not be there, to a voice that calls across the water when the moon is full, to a pattern so consistent, so impossible to dismiss, that 4 separate lighthouse keepers over the span of 90 years have documented the same phenomenon, word for word, as if they were all witnessing the same recurring nightmare. The current keeper, a man named Marcus Hewitt, is the 5th. He took the position in 2019, drawn by the solitude and the decent government salary, and for the first 8 months he found exactly what he was looking for. The work was methodical, the isolation complete, and the occasional supply boat that brought provisions and mail was his only human contact. He liked it that way. He had come to Cape Sorrow to escape something, though he never specified what, and the lighthouse gave him the distance he needed. But on the night of the first full moon in April 2020, something changed. He was performing his routine check of the lamp mechanism when he heard it. A voice. Faint, carried on the wind, but unmistakably human. It was calling a name. Captain Howell. Captain Howell. Over and over, rhythmic as a tide, plaintive as a prayer. Hewitt stepped outside onto the gallery that circles the lamp room 200 feet above the churning sea and scanned the water. The moon hung full and bloated in a cloudless sky, painting the ocean in silver and black. And there, just at the edge of visibility, was a ship. It was a 3-masted schooner, sails furled, hull dark and listing slightly to starboard, drifting on a course that would take it directly past the lighthouse. Hewitt grabbed his binoculars and focused on the vessel. No lights, no movement on deck, no flag. The wood looked old, weathered to the color of bone, and along the bow he could just make out faded lettering. The Persephone. He checked his radio, intending to report a derelict vessel, but before he could key the mic, the voice came again, louder now, clearer, and he realized with a cold shock that it was coming from the ship. A woman's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling for Captain Howell. Hewitt stood frozen, the binoculars trembling in his hands, and watched as the Persephone drifted past the lighthouse, silent except for that voice. And then slowly, impossibly, it began to fade. Not sailing away, not disappearing over the horizon, fading, becoming translucent, becoming nothing. Within minutes, the sea was empty, and the voice was gone. Hewitt went inside and opened the keeper's log. He flipped back through the pages, through years of entries, and found what he was looking for. April 14th, 2010. Keeper noted unidentified vessel matching description of historical schooner Persephone, last seen 1923, drifting past lighthouse during full moon. Voice heard calling name, Captain Howell. Vessel vanished without trace, April 16th, 2000. Same entry, almost word for word. April 12th, 1989. Again. The pattern went back decades, and the deeper he read, the more details emerged. The Persephone had been a merchant schooner operating out of Boston in the early 1900s, captained by a man named Elias Howell. In March of 1923, the ship departed Portland, Maine, with a crew of 12 and a cargo hold full of salted fish and timber, bound for Halifax. It never arrived, no wreckage was found, no distress signal received. The ship and everyone aboard simply vanished. But 2 weeks after its disappearance, a fisherman off Cape Sorrow reported seeing a schooner matching the Persephone's description drifting in the fog, and he claimed to have heard a woman screaming for the captain. The Coast Guard investigated, but found nothing. Over the following decades, similar sightings occurred, always during the full moon, closest to the anniversary of the ship's disappearance, always accompanied by that voice, always ending with the vessel fading into nothingness. Hewitt should have reported what he saw. He should have filed an incident report with the Coast Guard, noted it in the official log, and let someone else deal with it. But he didn't, because somewhere deep in his rational mind, he knew how it would sound. He knew they would dismiss it as exhaustion, isolation-induced hallucination, or worse. So instead, he did what any man in the 21st century would do when confronted with the impossible. He decided to record it. He ordered a high-sensitivity audio recorder online, the kind used by paranormal investigators and wildlife researchers, capable of capturing sounds far beyond the range of human hearing. And he waited for the next full moon, May 7th, 2020. Hewitt set up the recorder on the gallery at sunset, positioning it to face the direction from which the Persephone had appeared the previous month. He stood watch through the night, his breath misting in the cold Atlantic air, his eyes fixed on the black water. At 11:42 p.m. the voice began. "Captain Howell, Captain Howell." The recorder's LED indicator pulsed red, capturing everything. And then, right on schedule, the ship appeared. This time, Hewitt was ready. He filmed it on his phone, the shaky footage showing the ghostly outline of the schooner, the furled sails, the listing hull, and though the quality was poor, the shape was unmistakable. He could see the deck now, empty and dark, and he could see the figurehead, a carved woman with her arms outstretched, her face eroded by salt and time. The voice grew louder, more desperate, and Hewitt realized with a creeping horror that it was coming from below deck. From inside the ship, someone, or something, was trapped in the hold, calling for a captain who had been dead for nearly a century. The Persephone drifted past, closer this time, near enough that Hewitt could hear the creak of old wood, the groan of rigging strained by wind that didn't exist, and then, just as before, it began to fade. But this time, as the ship dissolved into the moonlight, the voice changed. It stopped calling for Captain Howell, and it started calling for Hewitt. His name, clear and undeniable, carried across the water in that same hoarse, desperate tone. Marcus Hewitt. Marcus Hewitt. He stumbled backward, the phone slipping from his hand, and the recorder kept running, kept capturing, as the ship vanished completely and the sea returned to its indifferent churning. And here, in the suffocating silence that follows such moments, I wonder if you've ever felt it. That pull from the ocean, that sense that something out there knows you, has been waiting for you. If you've experienced sightings you can't explain, if you've heard voices where no one should be, share your theories in the comments. Because this isn't an isolated case. This is part of a pattern, and the more we document, the closer we get to understanding what really comes back when the moon is full. Hewitt played the recording back the next morning, his hands shaking as he connected the device to his laptop. The audio was clear. Far clearer than it should have been given the distance and the wind. The woman's voice calling for Captain Howell was captured in perfect detail, each syllable distinct, each breath audible. And then, at the moment when Hewitt had heard his own name, the recording captured it too. But there was something else, something underneath. A low, rhythmic sound, almost subsonic, like the pulse of a massive engine or the heartbeat of something enormous. And beneath that, barely perceptible, were other voices, dozens of them, whispering, pleading, overlapping into a cacophony of despair. Hewitt isolated the frequencies, amplified them, and listened. They were speaking in English, in accents from another era, and they were begging. Begging to be let out, begging for someone to find them, begging for Captain Howell to open the hold. Hewitt sent the recording to a maritime historian at the University of Maine, a professor named Dr. Eleanor Voss, who specialized in lost vessels of the early 20th century. She called him 3 days later, and her voice was tense. The Persephone's manifest, she told him, listed a crew of 12. But when she cross-referenced the passenger records, she found something disturbing. There were supposed to be additional passengers aboard, a group of 23 immigrants traveling to Halifax to start new lives. They weren't listed on the official manifest because, at the time, undocumented passage was common. But testimony from a dock worker in Portland confirmed that the ship had taken them on, which meant that when the Persephone vanished, it wasn't carrying 12 souls, it was carrying 35. And according to one fragmented account Dr. Voss had uncovered in a private letter collection, Captain Howell had been deeply paranoid during the final weeks before departure. He had ordered the hold sealed with additional locks, claiming there was valuable cargo aboard, and he had refused to let anyone inspect it. The implication was clear. Those passengers had been locked in the hold, and when the ship went down, or whatever happened to it, they were trapped. Hewitt stood on the gallery that night, staring at the empty ocean, and felt the weight of that knowledge settle over him like a shroud. The Persephone wasn't just a ghost ship, it was a prison. And every full moon, it returned, still carrying the souls of the people who had died, screaming in the dark, still echoing with their desperate pleas for a captain who would never come. But now, the ship knew his name. Now it had called for him. And Hewitt understood, with a cold certainty that made his skin crawl, that he was being invited, that the Persephone wanted another keeper, another witness, or perhaps another prisoner. If you're still listening, if you followed this account to its edge, then you know what's at stake. These stories, these records, they need to be preserved. They need to be shared. Because the agencies that investigate maritime anomalies, the departments that classify unexplained phenomena, they depend on silence. They depend on skepticism. But we keep this channel alive to document what they won't acknowledge, to warn you about what really lives beneath the surface. Press the like button. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but because the ocean remembers, and it's calling. Hewitt stopped answering supply boat calls in July. The Coast Guard eventually sent a team to check on him, and they found the lighthouse operational, but empty. His belongings were still there. His coffee mug, half full, sat on the desk. The keeper's log was open to an entry dated July 4th, 2020, the night of the full moon. It read, "The Persephone came closer tonight. I could see figures on the deck this time. They were looking at me. I think I recognize one of them. I think it's Captain Howell. He's beckoning. The voice isn't calling anymore. It's singing. I'm going to go down to the water. I need to know what they want. I need to know why they keep coming back." The recorder was still on the gallery, and when the Coast Guard retrieved it, they found 73 minutes of audio from that night. Most of it was wind and waves, but in the final 5 minutes, there was a voice. Hewitt's voice. He was speaking calmly, almost serenely, and he was saying, "I see you now, I understand. I'll open the hold, I'll let them out." And then, cutting through the recording like a blade, came the woman's voice one last time, no longer desperate, no longer pleading, but triumphant. "Captain Hewitt, Captain Hewitt, welcome aboard." The lighthouse at Cape Sorrow has a new keeper now. A young woman from Nova Scotia who doesn't believe in ghost ships or cursed waters. She took the job because the pay is good and the isolation suits her. But she's been there for 3 months and the full moon is coming. And late at night, when the wind is right, she swears she can hear something out on the water. A voice, faint but growing louder, calling a name, not Captain Howell's, not Marcus Hewitt's, but hers. And if you live near the coast, if you hear voices on the wind when the moon is full, if you see a ship that shouldn't be there, drifting in waters it has no right to occupy, remember this: the Persephone is still out there. It's still looking for passengers. and it always, always comes back.